This is consuming the political world. Why are you guys so sensitive about this?
This is a story I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention.
Is this going to be a tipping point of some kind?
The fact that this happened in Florida tells me one thing and one thing only.
It's Political Rehab, our mashup of PTI and The Daily Show this week. The political world plays a Harp, Ossoff rising, Mickey sues Donald, mutiny on the Lincoln, and another DSA shocker. Plus, our weekly look at the midterm battlefield has a win for Republicans with a bigger trapdoor ahead. Let's get straight to this week's rundown. Natalie Harp is Trump's personal aide, known in his circle as the human printer for the portable printer she carries everywhere he goes. This week, we learned she once jumped into the trunk of an SUV rather than be left behind when there wasn't room for her in the motorcade. Trump has reportedly told staff that everyone else around him will go off and make money. They're already making money there, dude. Someday, except Harp, who will, quote, never leave him. After Senator Jon Ossoff drew attention to her in a speech this week, saying Trump prefers to, quote, travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar, all true, instead of doing his job, MAGA world melted down and CNN's Scott Jennings went into a screechy defense of her in an obvious audition for the White House press secretary job. Matt, this is consuming the political world, all of this speculation about Harp. Why are you guys so sensitive about this?
The media is obsessed with this. I was at Bedminster a couple weeks ago and was there when Trump came off the golf course, and I watched his golf cart drive right by me, and right behind him was Natalie Harp, and I could not believe how much she looked like Ivanka. It is creepy. But the problem is, it's not just her unhealthy obsession with Trump or the fact that she did jump in that trunk or she's run down the fairway chasing him. There are two real issues here. One, she only fills him with positive stories. So if you want any proof that Trump is living in a fantasy world, just look at Natalie Harp and the way she fills his mind with garbage that he is loved and beloved by the American people. But secondly, probably more importantly here, is she is accountable to only Donald Trump, which means she does not answer White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, which means if Trump wants to repost a racist video, she does it. If Trump wants to change foreign policy, Marco Rubio has to read about it on social media, which is why this story took off. It is why Scott Jennings and others push back so hard, because it is so weird. It is so much obsession and it is so much of a problem. You can always tell the problems by how much we push back.
Yes, methinks the MAGA doth protest too much. Look, if bad information is all that she's filling the president of the United States with, then that would actually be a good outcome. I'm not going to make the joke that I really want to make. Yeah, it's creepy. It's weird. There are obvious overtones to this. We're not going to go there. We're not that kind of show. This is a classy show. Okay. But what you put your finger on is indeed the problem. There has been a lot of consternation quietly inside your party and in media circles about who is this person. She is a former OANN reporter. So she's not a complete political neophyte, but why does she have direct access to the headspace of the president of the United States? Why is she the one shaping his perception of the world? It's like a national security issue, and it's definitively creepy.
Yeah, and there are reports that she doesn't even have security clearance right now. So there's all kinds of questions that brewing. This was all started when Jon Ossoff made his remarks. Now, what I found really interesting is that following his remarks, Google searches for Trump's executive assistant, Natalie Harp, spiked by 5,000%. News outlets hurried to meet the demand for information by publishing news stories. It flooded social media. Liberal commentators cheered Ossoff, while conservative commentators condemned him. Matt, was this just a smart political strategy in the age where clips drive the news cycle? Or do you think this was something he just stumbled into?
I don't want to give him too much credit here for stumbling onto the fact that an attractive blonde woman is going to drive eyeballs. No shit. You and I are aware of this. Fox News is definitely super duper aware of this. It's an effect you and I have noticed. Anytime in a thumbnail on this show, we happen to, because the news dictates it, not because we look for it, because again, this is a classy kind of show. Anytime we happen to have an attractive blonde female as part of our thumbnail, we get more eyeballs. We get more click through. It's just the way of the world. And so, yeah, it was super cagey. It kind of begs the question, why has no one brought this up before? Why did it take Ossoff, who is a very clever dude, to bring this up? This is clearly a very sensitive spot. There's smoke and fire going on here. And Ossoff gets credit for, maybe it was obvious, but he was the only one to spot it.
So what you're saying is we should tell our producer to put Natalie Harp's picture on this week's thumbnail? Is that what I'm hearing from you right now?
Wait, brilliant idea. Just because the news demands it. Or it could be me in a wig.
I think it was a brilliant move by Ossoff. He is clearly maneuvering for 2028. And this was a way that he knew would get under their skin and would get all of MAGA world responding as quick as they possibly can.
This week, it became Mickey versus Donald. That's right. Disney just did something almost no major American corporation has done so far under this administration. It fought back. It sued the Trump administration instead of caving to it. ABC and Disney filed a First Amendment lawsuit against the FCC this week and its Uber henchman Brendan Carr, accusing the agency of waging a retaliatory campaign against the network for content Trump doesn't like. Yeah, they're doing that. Like, Matt, is this going to be a tipping point of some kind? Will this embolden other media companies to stop rolling over and playing dead? Or is Disney just a little bit better positioned to fight than most?
Look, conservatives should be cheering this because we do not want a government that is so big, so intrusive that they can tell journalists and media companies what they can put on and what they cannot put on. I don't care whether I like ABC's coverage. I don't care if you like The View. The First Amendment was designed specifically for speech the government doesn't like. But I think one of the things that's really interesting here is, don't forget, Disney paid $16 million to settle Trump's lawsuit over Stephanopoulos. Media companies altered policies back in the past. I think what this really shows, though, is how much Trump is a lame duck right now, is that he doesn't have the power. A year ago, companies were willing to court him. Now they're taking his administration to court. I think Washington smells blood in the water. They're testing how far this can go. And I expect other corporations, other media companies will follow suit.
I have the text of the opening line from the lawsuit here. Oh boy, I sure hate authoritarians, huh? Fuck you, Brendan. I don't think, wow. Again, this is nothing but a classy show.
Yes.
The actual opening line was government censorship is deeply un-American. And I hope that is something that most people in this country can agree with. It's certainly something that you and I, over and over again, even coming from opposite sides of the political aisle, that you and I can agree on because we share that same reverence for the fabric of what makes America. This is the thing that gave a lot of people hope when Harvard stood up to the administration in a lawsuit for its heavy-handed attempts to bring the institution to heel. And it had made me wish that more institutions had done it sooner or Harvard had gone sooner. I do think that there is hope that this will be a model for other companies.
I want to switch gears. This is a story I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention. The USS Lincoln, where families and sailors have reported food, hygiene, plumbing, mail, and morale problems. Now, the Navy itself acknowledged that combat disrupted normal supply hubs and had to prioritize food and then hygiene supplies. The Military Times reported multiple incidents involving sailors attempting or preparing to go overboard. Now, here's the problem, and here's where this story really pissed me off. Trump responded to the lengthy deployment by saying the Lincoln has been there not nearly long enough, and Hegseth said reports of condition have been completely misrepresented. Matt, I am pissed at this one because I think the commander-in-chief should have stood up and said, if these things are true, I'm going to look into it. I'm going to get this thing fixed. Instead, he took the exact wrong approach. Am I overreacting here?
At the risk of sounding like a parody of Tucker Carlson, what are we doing? What's going on? Even as much psychological cognitive dissonance as MAGA people seem to have gone through for the last 10 years. I can't believe that this one is just going to float through their mental transom without raising some hackles. The president of the United States having such callous indifference to our military. Admiral Bone Spurs himself saying, oh no, they haven't suffered enough. How this isn't drawing an angry and outraged reaction from the 2 million active service members we have in this country is far beyond me. And it goes back to our earlier topic. Jon Ossoff, this is exactly how Democrats need to be drawing the contrast here. He said, while sailors on the Lincoln fight his war, the president sleeps through his meetings, he golfs, he trades stocks. That's it. That's the contrast here. It's the deep indifference and corruption of this unhinged, deranged, somnolent maniac to actual heroes who are putting their lives on the line and serving our country. It's an absolute disgrace. And I wish that politically the American people would treat it that way.
Pete Hegseth has this job because he was supposed to be the guy that would look out for the warfighter, and he has failed miserably. This is perhaps even the biggest reason Hegseth should be fired, because not only has he screwed up the war so badly that we don't even have enough missiles to fight, the fact that he is not looking out for our soldiers, not looking out for our sailors, and that the conditions are so deplorable, and that he calls it false and fake news is qualification for him to be kicked out right now.
We're calling this next one Socialist Surprise, which makes me think of Vladimir Lenin springing out of a Jack in the Box. That's essentially what happened to me and to Florida Democrats and to most relatively moderate Democrats in the past few days when the political establishment got another brushback pitch in the form of State Representative Angie Nixon, a Democratic Socialist, who raised barely $1 million, crushing Alex Vindman, the Trump impeachment hearing star, who raised $16 million in the Florida Democratic Senate primary in Trump's home state. Matt, oh gosh, I need therapy. We call this show political rehab, and I'm here for it because, ow, I don't love anything about this. And as a political operative, it has to stand out to you when someone with a 16-1 money disadvantage has this kind of a romp. So what does this tell you as a Republican about how the ground is shifting here?
If I was getting ready to jump on Fox News or CNN, I would say this is proof positive that socialists are now mainstream in the Democratic Party, and you have a real issue, my friend, and it is going to destroy you.
But why you got to spike the football on my prone corpse?
See, this is what's
why?
But I'm going to take a slightly different approach here, because the truth is, this is a big nothing burger. This is nothing. A Democrat's not going to win Florida. It's not going to happen. We see this in blue states all the time, where Republicans nominate these wackadoodles who are just out there trying to seek some sort of notoriety here. That's what happened here. This isn't socialist rising as much as I want to say it is, and as much as I'm going to present it in every little campaign story that's out there. The fact that this happened in Florida tells me one thing and one thing only. Democratic Party who showed up in these primaries wanted to send a message. They don't think they're going to win, so they picked the wackadoodle candidate just to say you need to fight a little more. It's a who cares vote. You're not winning Florida. It's not going to happen. So it was just a throwaway vote to send a message.
Oh, thank you. That was
You're welcome.
Remarkably nice and very comforting of you. That's very interesting, the idea that this might have been a, you know what, we're going down anyway, so we might as well do it with our middle fingers extended. Maybe that's what this vote was. It is ironic that Vindman is a Jewish immigrant born in the Soviet Union. Nixon is an advocate for cutting all U.S. aid to Israel. That's interesting in a state with the nation's third largest Jewish population. It's also of unending interest every time you have one of these massive money disadvantages, which goes to show that ads aren't that effective. People don't pay a lot of attention. Super low turnout primaries can become super duper weird. Speaking of which, that is a great lead in. We are 75 days away from the midterm elections. So it's time for this edition of The Battlefield.
The polls are shifting. The map is changing. The fight for Congress is on. This is the battlefield.
All right, let's do our usual 3 big observations for you, 3 big observations for me, including this week's scoreboard. So you go first. What's number 1?
There were a bunch of primaries this week. The one that really stuck out to me was Alaska Senate. The Democrat got more votes than the Republican in the primary. Now, Alaska is a top 4 primary, and that means the top 4, regardless of party, go on to the general election. And under that scenario, Dan Sullivan, the Republican incumbent U.S. Senator, came in second by right now about 8,000 votes. Alaska is a red state. And that's important if the Republican is coming in second in these kind of jungle primaries, because it does start to signal a little bit of concern there.
Yeah, this is right in keeping with many other signals we've had about Republican turnout problems all cycle. There have been 117 state legislative special elections since January 2025. Voters have 5.6 points toward Democrats. We're also seeing all kinds of polling signals. Percent of 2024 Trump voters, these are people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024, 38% of them say that they've lost confidence in their vote. 16% of them would not vote for Trump if they had to do it all over again. Elliot Morris has found in his polling that 13% of Republican 2024 Trump voters regret how they voted in the last election, and 21% of them say they believe he should be impeached. These are the numbers. When you're in a midterm election, which is driven by turnout, it's how you can turn out your base. You look at this number from Alaska, this feels like another brick in the igloo.
And I'm not saying in August that Sullivan's going to lose. In 2004, when I was on the Murkowski race, the first time we were ahead in the polls was the Friday before the election. So there is plenty of time on this. But his poor performance in this primary is the flashing warning sign that should alarm everyone.
In the midterms, turnout is king. All right, what's number 2?
Number 2 is my home state of South Carolina. There was a debate for the runoff. Graham was asked a question about Taiwan, and her answer was, quote, "I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military." She followed up by saying, "National security is not my thing." Now, a lot of problems with this one.
That SNL skit with the 2 people who want to become synchronized swimmers, it's "I'm not a strong swimmer." Okay. Thanks, Darlene.
People give an answer to every question that we could possibly imagine. So one of 2 things happened here. One, Graham could not answer a single foreign policy question. And so they gave her this throwaway answer and hoped that it worked because she was the grieving sister. Or 2, she came up with it on her own and doesn't actually know anything about foreign policy. Either way, it is completely disqualifying here. And the reason why this is so important is this could put this race in play.
My read on it was slightly different. I want to get your reaction to this. As a Democrat, I just don't think Democrats have a realistic shot here. Our last nominee here was Jamie Harrison. He's a friend of mine. He put forward as good an effort and raised as much money as any Democrat could, and he came up wildly short. I see this as a test of the power of Trump's endorsement. Trump has endorsed Graham. Ralph Norman has questioned that endorsement. This past week, 3 Trump endorsees lost in their primaries, despite the power, supposedly, of Trump's endorsement in the Republican Party. That brings the tally to 7 Trump-endorsed candidates who've lost their primaries in this cycle. What's your read on that as a Republican? Is this a referendum on the value of Trump's endorsement?
Trump is strong-arming everyone in the state to endorse Graham, and he is pushing them hard to get on his side. If Ralph Norman wins the primary, this isn't even a race for Democrats. If Darlene Graham wins this primary, it creates a whole nother problem. I think you're right. The test on Trump's endorsement is really coming to a head because don't forget, his nominee for governor lost. And so he had to do the dual endorsement along the way. South Carolina is a Republican red state.
All right, give me your number 3.
Number 3 is a smaller microcosm of what I think could be happening. In Pennsylvania, Brandon Dukes, the Democrat candidate, defeated the Republican Scott Timko with a lead of just shy of 100 votes in a race to represent Pennsylvania's 12th district. Now, Trump carried this by 18 percentage points in 2024 and is not elected a Democrat to the state house in over 20 years. The two are going to face off again in November, and maybe the Republicans going to pick it up. But what struck me about this, is it an indication? Is it a canary in the coal mine? In these districts that are solid Trump, those margins are shrinking by a lot, and it could spell trouble for us in November.
I cited the number earlier, 117 special elections prior to this one since January 2025, an advantage of 5.6 percentage points of shift toward Democrats. When I was last writing about this back in April, we were seeing shifts of 20 points and higher. That's the kind of margin that happened here. It's just another indication of just how little motivation the Republican base has to turn out in this election. Could it change in the next 75 days? It could, but show me the thing that's going to change it. Show me the thing that's going to inspire this Republican base.
So that has to be showing up in the scorecard. What are you seeing?
That's absolutely right. This is a week that was a brighter one for Republicans than we've seen in a long time because there was a little bit of lift in Trump's approval rating and a more notable bounce back in his approval rating among independents, which, as we've discussed on this show before, is both a proxy for persuasion for swing voters and for base motivation, which is all important in a midterm election.
What else are you seeing out there that might indicate some of the changing battlefield?
The big write-up that I did this week on my Substack was the dilemma that I see forming for Republican candidates. And the analogy that I drew was this. I've been there as a congressional chief of staff for a Democratic member of Congress in 2010, which was an awful year for Democrats. He had the worst political profile that you could have in that cycle. You're a Democratic member of Congress at a time where people really don't like the Democratic majority in Congress. And he was a national co-chairman for Barack Obama in 2008 at a time where people were really sour on the president. This is the exact environment that Republicans are facing right now. And so the question that we faced at the time that I think is forming for Republican candidates right now is, when do you jump ship? When does it become every man for himself and you're just going to try to swim your own course through this storm versus staying on board with the team? There is some pretty dramatic evidence that I outlined on Substack for the value of trying to separate yourself in a really high profile way from a party brand and a party leadership that's going south. For example, in 2010 for Democrats, the highest profile political issue that you could make a mark on was the vote for the Affordable Care Act. And in 2010, House Democrats who were in swing districts, those are districts that John McCain had carried, those Democrats who voted for the Affordable Care Act only survived their reelection at a rate of 11%. Those who voted against the Affordable Care Act survived at a rate of 39%. And in 2018, when the shoe was on the other foot and it was Republicans in the same wave position, you saw some evidence in the same vein. Only 3 Republicans survived in districts that had voted for Hillary Clinton, and 2 of them voted against repealing the ACA. And a group of researchers found that overall, Trump's endorsement, lining up with Donald Trump in 2018, hurt Republican candidates in the general election to the tune of about 5 percentage points. It's a real question that I think Republicans face inside campaigns. And let me ask you about it. Is this a conversation, in all honesty, that Republicans are starting to have? Do they want to create some high-profile daylight from Donald Trump and from the Republican Party brand?
The way we look at elections is we try to time that momentum towards when people start to vote. And so you're not going to see that in August. I think what we're going to see in September is more and more opportunities for us to take votes that can help the American people, use it as our Hail Mary pass, if you will, but start to separate yourself when it is going to have the least amount of blowback by Trump and the greatest impact on voting trends. The only thing we can hope is that it's not too little too late.
So what you're saying is that Mike Johnson and John Thune, if they're smart, are going to try to set up votes that aren't just messaging votes to motivate the base, but are opportunities for their endangered members to cast a high-profile vote against Donald Trump.
I don't think there'll be high-profile votes against Donald Trump. Members who are in vulnerable districts often get a pass on some of these votes. And in typical White House, what would happen is they would make sure they had the votes to pass whatever piece of legislation, but the people who needed to vote against it could vote against it.
Not
and it
this
was
White
just
House.
not this White House. A bigger problem right now because those votes can't happen as easily. I think what we'll see more and more is we'll see people out on the campaign trail taking those positions.
To put a period on the end of this thought, that really is the dilemma that we faced as Democrats and that you guys are going to face this time as Republicans, is that it's awfully tempting to do that jump ship maneuver to try to create some high profile daylight, even if it's just one showcase vote that voters, you can use as a shorthand with voters to say, see, I'll stand against the president. I'll stand against my own party. I'm independent. The issue is in this Republican Party, you can very quickly alienate the MAGA base. And it's just such a big chunk. It's not the majority of the Republican Party, but it's such a substantial proportion of it that if you lose that segment, if that becomes a drop-off vote, if they decide to walk on you, you're toast. So it's a real, genuine dilemma. And I think it's going to be really tough for your side to navigate in the next 75 days.
Exactly. You've looked at all the data. You've looked at all the polls. You've done all the research. What's your bottom line for this week?
My bottom line for this week is that this is the first week that we've been doing this battlefield discussion where I'm giving a slight tilt toward Republicans. And it's just because of those top line structural indicators, the Trump approval number having some recovery, the Trump approval number among independents having an even bigger recovery. Look, it wasn't all rosy for Republicans this week, not by a long shot, but an improvement is still an improvement. So while the overall picture, I'm sure you and I agree, is decidedly favoring Democrats, for this week only, the numbers drifted slightly in Republicans' direction, and that gives them a slight win for the week.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to take exception at is the down arrow. You made it. It's a down arrow when the Republicans are winning.
Yeah, that's because I write all of this from a Democrat's perspective. Look, that's the kind of thing that makes me cling to a sliver of hope about the future. And speaking of which, it's just about time for our weekly dose of hope.
Back in January, I told you science had finally caught up with me. Steak was back, eggs were back, even wine was getting a second look. Apparently, scientists have been studying the rest of my daily routine. Researchers have discovered that people who drink more coffee tend to have less body fat and more muscle. For years, people have said, I drink too much coffee. Turns out, I've been working out. Every morning, while other people are putting on gym clothes, stretching, lifting weights, sweating like animals, I'm sitting there with a cup of coffee, quietly building muscle. I've probably done 5 sets already today. And the coffee news keeps getting better. Study after study has linked coffee consumption with all kinds of health benefits, lower risk of diabetes, heart disease, and even longer life.
Dementia too.
Exactly. And at this point, Starbucks needs to stop calling it a Grande Pike place and start calling it preventative medicine. And then came the breakthrough I have been waiting for. A pharmaceutical company announced the results of a phase 1 trial of its experimental drug ENV308, which is designed to mimic a hormone released while exercising. That's right, a pill that can provide the same healthy benefits as exercise. Now, this is probably the greatest invention of all time, next to the wheel, fire, and probably the iPhone. It's still in clinical trials. And of course, doctors say I'm supposed to keep exercising for now, so I guess I'll just drink another cup of coffee. But give these people 6 more months, and they're going to discover that sitting in a recliner, watching football is excellent for your cardiovascular system. And that, my friends, is my dose of hope.
gives new meaning to the phrase America runs on Duncan. I want to start off my dose of hope by talking about your girl, the guiding star in your sky, Nancy Mace, who, after losing her South Carolina gubernatorial bid and announcing she won't seek another House term, revealed a whole new set of tattoos this week in clips from her own YouTube show, Get Maced. I love it. It's like the Department of War. Her tattoos included flowers, birds, religious imagery, and the word justice across her arms. Is that like just and then ice on the Think about that, Nancy. Because she's a public figure, it instantly became a social media spectacle with political commentators weighing in on how much she seems to enjoy the attention. Listen, people, free Nancy, lay off. I say, let her get as many tattoos as she wants. If it makes her happy, it makes me happy. Politicians have bizarre second acts. Al Gore grew his gnarly beard. Jimmy Carter turned into a literal secular saint. George W. Bush went from being a famously unsuccessful and unpopular president to an even more unsuccessful and mediocre painter. And look, I'd like to make that my entire dose of hope, but I can't because it's not really that inspirational. For my true inspiration this week, I want to go back to the science well, and I want to talk about something that no one saw coming because it was too small. Scientists this week unveiled microscopic robots entirely powered by light that can navigate through liquid, hunt down bacteria. They're not controlled by wires or motors. They're driven purely by how light interacts with their structure, and that lets scientists steer them through fluid environments with laser-like precision. Holy fantastic voyage, Batman. Really? Microscopic light-powered robots injected into our bodies? I too will become one with the Borg. Resistance is futile. The applications go well beyond a party trick. Researchers see potential uses in manipulating individual cells and microbes, which could eventually help with everything from targeted drug delivery to cleaning up contamination. It's genuinely strange, it's wonderful, it's microscopic and macroscopic, and it's delightful. And compared to the other things that we're dealing with at all kinds of scales this week, it's at least a tiny little sliver of a dose of hope. And on that note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.